Uh,
Uh,
Hello, YouTube.
Good morning. As usual, mine is slow to pop up here. There we go. Sure, it's on mute. It is. Let's get to the Twitter, tweet out the feed, and hit record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, October the 24th. As we mentioned before recording, it's 10:24:24. Do with that what you will. It is 9:10 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic, back from a long journey into the great state of Indiana. I think there are people that think it's a great state. I would not be one of them. But uh, yeah, you got a chance to see the Indiana show that's become kind of a national story. It's kind of cool, and you got to see that up close and personal. What'd you think? People in the stands, which is awesome.
Yes.
We've been to
hmm
games with Iowa where you could probably land a plane in the stands without hitting anybody.
I used to make fun of, I call it the Bermuda Triangle of the Big Ten, for at least for football, Purdue, and Illinois, and Indiana. And two out of the three were sold out, and Purdue was basically sold out. I mean, if there were 2,000 empty seats, I'd been surprised. So for the wasteland of Big Ten football to have it that way, it was the biggest crowd they've had since 1979 at Indiana, and they fit the part. I mean, they looked really good, not just good. I mean, they looked offensively. I haven't seen a team that efficient in a long time. And I mean, Curtis Work unfortunately banged his thumb on a helmet and lost the thumbnail, and so he's out for this week. And I don't know, there might have been something worse that they're just not disclosing, whether it's a hairline fracture or something like that. But
Yeah, if you lose your nail on your thumb,
yeah,
that's a pretty heavy impact. My guess is there's probably more damage than just that.
yeah. I mean, and when you're talking about a thumb, not that the other digits aren't important, but when you're gripping a football, I mean, you don't have any kind of balance on the ball, and
Mhm.
so or grip to it. So it's pretty difficult. So I think probably in his case, this week against Washington, he's not playing, and then we'll go from there. But I saw two games, Purdue and Oregon, and then Nebraska, Indiana, and combined score of 91-7. No field goals, Rob.
One
Uh,
was expected, one was not.
yeah. And I would argue that Oregon played a really blah game in winning 35-0. It's kind of like we see it sometimes in high school football where and then there's the running clock, and then they run the ball every play. And Oregon looked like to me that they just won one of the biggest games in school history. And then they were going across 3 time zones and playing on 6 days rest, and still were way better than Purdue, and showed it in a 35-0 win. But Indiana's for real. They're not a fake team. Now, that being said, I think Washington has some unique challenges that could make this a very competitive game this week. But I'll say this: that to see what Kirk Cignetti has done to that program, the worst in Big Ten history, even worse than Northwestern historically, um, is nothing short of remarkable. Maybe one of the great coaching stories we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah, it's been, a lot of times you see somebody that is that boisterous and confident and outwardly confident and saying things like he said, it can sometimes blow up in their face, but he's walked the walk after talking the talk, and it's fun to see. It's fun to see stories like that. On the other side of the coin, Scott, the team that actually Iowa actually plays this year out of those four, um, Nebraska, obviously got knocked back down to earth. Um, Thoughts on what you saw from the Huskers, who will be here on Black Friday for the last game of the season?
You'd think for getting beat as badly as they did on the scoreboard that, I would look at them and go, God, they're trash. I don't really think that. I think it snowballed on them, that they're still a pretty decent team and they've got some good players. And it was clear, though, that Raiola was rattled. no question. I mean, they got to him and he couldn't figure it out. And, and then that interception right after at halftime, it was like 28-7 at halftime. And then they kind of start to drive, and then he threw like an interception, went back like 70 some odd yards. And then they scored on it a few plays later. That he was completely rattled, probably what their first big road game that they've been on and stuff. So, and it was a hostile environment for a change. It was like what it was across the street over at Assembly Hall for basketball. And I still think they're okay. I mean, I think based on what we saw with Iowa, that it's still probably a fairly even matchup. And I'm not saying that means that Indiana would beat Iowa 56-7, but I think they would beat Iowa like 34-10. I do believe that just from what I saw. So it's I think Iowa and Nebraska will be probably a pretty competitive matchup. They've got a decent defense. They just didn't show it because what Indiana is uniquely qualified to do is the passing game is proficient to the best I've ever seen. Almost they space the field so well. They've got really good receivers. Rourke can really sling it, and he trusts his receivers, and the coaching staff, you can tell, trusts everybody to make the back shoulder throw, to find ways, throw it up for your receiver to have your receiver make a catch. And some of those things were just really impressive to watch in person. And I'm not saying they're going to beat Ohio State when they play them in a couple of weeks, but I think they can give them a game.
Is that in Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to see Ohio State go to Indiana. That would be, I'd give them a better chance, and it would be interesting to see.
But I think they could beat Michigan the week before.
Yeah. Michigan looks very susceptible. Watch some of the Illinois game, and that was their offense is offensive. And we know about offensive offense.
Yes, we do.
And we're gonna get reminded on Saturday. We'll get into that a little bit when we're talking about Northwestern and Iowa's passing offenses. We try to do the big picture thing, kind of. Iowa was a long shot. Watching College Game Day last week, they had a graphic with like the odds based on whatever ESPN generates. How they do that, but they had like the percentages of the top teams, and then the middle teams, and then teams that were I think it was like 5%, something like that, or low percentage. But Iowa was in that group with like Pitt and schools like that are still unbeaten, and that gave you an indication of the strength of the Big Ten and Iowa's chances. Obviously, that's over now with the loss at Michigan State. Kind of twofold here. Big Ten wise, bigger picture, just from a conference standpoint, I know you do your college playoff, outlook, kind of where teams sit right now. How does the Big Ten shape up right now? Granted, Iowa's not in the picture, but I think it's still important to talk about who has a path to the playoff.
There are 5 to me that are legit, and then there are 2 that are just like.
Can I ask you this? It seems like Big Ten went maybe earlier in the season from potential 3 teams in to now it seems like more people are projecting 4.
Yeah, and a lot of that is schedule based. I mean, you look at the SEC, and one of the things I went through in my Wednesday CFP look was there are 30 Power 5 teams that have any kind of a real legitimate hope aside from just massive chaos.
Yeah.
And and really you shrink that in about half, for the legitimate number. But with the SEC, that now you've got teams beating each other up, even though they only play 8 league games. But you got Tennessee beating Bama, and then you have Arkansas beating Tennessee, just all these games, and nobody's undefeated in the SEC. So that's going to drag some teams down. And as Indiana, for instance, keeps winning, or as Illinois keeps winning, then, I mean, are you really going to pick a 10-2 SEC team over an 11-1 Big Ten team? That's really the question mark. But we haven't seen really any big upsets yet among the elite of the Big Ten. That could happen this week. I mean, Washington could play a very good game offensively, and they have a week off, and they go to Indiana, and Indiana maybe under backup quarterback Tavon Jackson could kind of struggle. That's possible. Or you look at Wisconsin hosting James Franklin Walk Away U. maybe Wisconsin pulls that out. They've played really well lately. And I don't think anybody would cry any tears at all in the Big Ten if that happens. And so then I'm going off on a little bit of a rant on that, but
I'm with you here.
Yeah,
and my blood is starting to boil. So
me too. I've been, because Audrey's my teammate and she did a great job, and then all of a sudden, and I commended her on it, and then I've got Penn State fans and my coming after me, and I'm like, you think that by now you didn't learn your lesson before? It's like last time you just looked away. Now you're walking away.
It's a cult. It is, and it's gross. But anyway.
Yeah, I digress, and I could get on our
tangent. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google Penn State rape. You'll get a lot of sightings for that.
Yeah.
But the most recent one, you'll know what we're talking about. But it's obviously not a new thing up there in State College. I refuse to call it by the other name. I haven't since the Sandusky stuff. That what they like to use the H word up there, Valley. Nope, you're State College.
Unhappy Valley, but yeah. No. I mean, with the Big Ten, you look and there's 5 teams with 1 loss. They're all in the top 20. Illinois' loss was to Penn State, who was undefeated. Ohio State's loss was to Oregon. They're undefeated, and was right down to the wire. And Oregon's ranked number 1 in the country. You got 3 in the top 4. So, I mean, I think right now they're in a pretty good position. Now, again, teams can start knocking each other off, and they will, because Ohio State plays both Indiana and Penn State. Illinois goes to Oregon this week, so they'll get some separation there. But I think they're in a situation where they're going to get a minimum of 3 and a max of 4. And the other 2 that are kind of on the periphery, Wisconsin and even Nebraska, just because they have 2 losses, and you never know what if Nebraska goes to Ohio State and wins? I cannot in any way, shape, or form ever think that will happen. I would take,
but you got to leave open the possibility when you're projecting, including teams that have even a slightest of chances. And unfortunately, that's not Iowa anymore.
Yeah. It's like if in baseball, you got 9 games left and you're 7 games back.
Yeah.
You have a mathematical chance. Yeah. But it's kind of a Hail Mary. So, I mean, I think there are 5 teams that are legitimately there, but the SEC, there's 9 that still have chances. And, they all kind of play each other a little bit. And in fact, I devised a scenario. What if there's an 8-way tie at 6-2, and it's actually kind of legitimate? Then, but
seems like the ACC has kind of raised its profile, so to speak, this fall. Maybe some teams that are better than we thought going into the year.
Yeah. I mean, when Florida State hit the toilet, got flushed. I mean, they were bad news, but Miami, is still winning. Clemson rebounded from its big loss. And then there are other teams. Pitt's undefeated. SMU's only losses to BYU. And at the time you didn't know what to make of it. BYU's still undefeated. And, there are a few others that I think, even Virginia Tech, Syracuse have a chance, but they're kind of in the Nebraska category to me, but especially Virginia Tech. But, and then the Big 12, there's still 6, but 3 are legitimate, to get in the playoff: Iowa State, BYU, and Kansas State. So I guess if there's one bonus for Iowa fans is now you can quit rooting for the Cyclones.
That's true. Yeah, I watched some of their games Saturday night against Central Florida. Those are the games when you have a special season that you're able to pull out. And when, they go the other way, that's when you end up with, 6, 7, maybe 8 wins, when those games go the opposite way. And we're kind of seeing Iowa on the opposite side this year, including the game against Iowa State. Coin flip game, it goes against them, goes to Iowa State. So that's kind of played out as we've seen it go here through the first, 7 games of the season in 2024. Let's flip over to what we saw last week. Neither Scott or I was in East Lansing. As he mentioned, he was in Indiana. I was back here doing some high school football and some other stuff that I had on my plate. And not sad I missed that one in person, because that was there haven't been a lot of times it's happened, but during, my time covering Iowa, you kind of know what you're going to get a lot of times, but there are those games that are like the Michigan and Ohio State at home last decade where Iowa
Mhm.
kind of shocked the world. And then there was Saturday night where you just leave scratching your head and saying, was that the team I saw last week against Washington? No, it
Mhm.
didn't look anything like it. And there's so many layers to this, Scott. It's disappointing knowing what they had on the line, a veteran team perform like that. And it wasn't that, um, it was bad luck. They got their tails kicked by a
Mhm.
team that had a better game plan, by a team that had a better game plan and executed that game plan. And
Yeah.
it was a pretty thorough beating.
It was what it was deserved. There's nothing, like the Iowa State game, you can kind of circle around and
Yeah.
go, yeah, yeah. Well, that's if this that's understandable. What if we would have done something different at the goal line? What if there'd have been a different coverage? Those what ifs happens every game. This one was they had opportunities, but I'm not going to dignify it by trying to go through that. I think what you do is you say the offense lost the game in the first half and the defense lost the game in the second half. And there's a couple of disappointing aspects in retrospect to me that really stand out. One is the statistics merited and half a season's worth of numbers that Iowa could exploit Michigan State in multiple areas. They're highly penalized. Their turnover margin is bad. They can't run the ball. That's what the numbers said. It didn't happen. And then you look at Iowa's defense, which we've seen has kind of been the crown jewel of this program. This is what led this program twice in the last previous 3 years to 10 wins and division titles. Cracked. It didn't tackle. It was blown off the line of scrimmage, got beat repeatedly in coverage throughout the game, and gave a very talented young quarterback a lot of confidence. And he's got immense talent. And we saw a lot of that on display, but now it's like, okay, Aiden Childs, you've arrived. He had 8 interceptions and 5 touchdowns going into that game. Now he had 1 interception and almost a second. But you look at it in totality with what was at stake, and to see the way they played. Now you're in a real uncomfortable purgatory of the season, Rob, which is in the past 10, well, almost 15 years, you had division titles. The potential, well, okay, we're not going to go to the playoff, but we got a chance to go to the championship game because of the division. Well, now you can't. That's not going to happen. I mean, they can still go 7-2 in the Big Ten, and maybe, I don't know, but I'm not going to go there. There's going to have to be some major chaos for me to get even in that conversation. And so now you've got 5 games left with no hope of the playoff. And it's like, well, what are we hoping for? Tampa, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So Ferentz gets dumped with mayonnaise. I mean,
I think there are people hoping for that.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Actually, I would take that. But again, that's where you are right now.
We've talked about it. It's the new landscape of college football. Now you're out of the college football playoff as a team. Like next year, if this was the case, you're expecting a rebuild this team was a legit college football playoff contender coming into the season with what it had returning. And now you're weeks before Halloween and it's over.
Yeah.
What do you do as a fan? What do you do as a member of the team? We asked them a little bit about it on Tuesday, and they say the right things. We're playing for each other, playing for pride, playing to get to 10 wins, which is still a possibility. And those are all things. But it's harder to do that now.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, because the prize at the end is different. There is no Big Ten West title. There is no chance to play in Indianapolis now. So you really have to go out there and play for pride and play for each other. And Iowa's done a good job of that in the past, but this is, again, just kind of a different animal. And like, to your point, I haven't really gotten maybe you have, I haven't gotten a real feel from the fans just in terms of how they view the rest of the season. I'm not talking to people that are freaking pissed and lashing out at us. I'm talking about like well-grounded fans. What's their view of the rest of the season? What would make them feel like this was a rewarding season? And I just don't know.
Great question, because I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I've talked to the level-headed fans,
Yeah. They
which
are out there. And actually, most of them are.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
the
80 to
lunatic
90%.
fringe.
Yeah. I mean, we hear from the lunatic fringe that, come after us for, oh, you guys don't ask tough questions and all. And that's, come on, man. What do you want us to ask? I mean,
Ask
the
Kirk
quarter,
the same question 8 different ways. He's going to answer it the same way.
yeah, it's just, it's, and that probably feeds into this issue, Rob, so much because over the years they've been the same kind of questions about the same issues and
Yeah, that's
nothing's
true.
really
It's a great
changed. And
point.
now they do have a new coordinator, but the quarterback play has remained the same. And then if you take a peek over at Spencer Petrus's numbers right now, and the guy's averaging 326 yards a game and 66% completion percentage, then that'll make you go, what? Spencer Petras? And
Yeah.
well, granted they're 1-5, so they're terrible, but he's still completing a lot of passes, and he's got more touchdown passes in 5 games because he was hurt for 2 or whatever than he'd had at Iowa in any season. So it's I think that it's kind of that stale, same old, here we go again, blah, 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 and when you feel like as a fan or a supporter, your voice doesn't matter, then that's where you get stuck. And unfortunately, that's kind of where Iowa is, because Kirk wins, again, are you going to throw away a coach that's won 10 games, 3 out of the last 5 years? I mean, that's what some people want, but I understand the thought of, I just want something different. and that's a scary position too.
To watch. I got that from a lot of people after last season that when I say people, I mean level-headed fans saying, it's great we won all those games, but it's not enjoyable to watch. The product, when you're just watching the defense and punting, you can joke about it. Punting is winning, things like that. But when you're sitting there paying a lot of money and sitting there and watching 60 minutes of football where your team can't score, and it's better this year,
Yeah.
but there are similar problems. And the main problem, again, is quarterback. And it's the same, what's the upside?
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago. And now we're here again. Cade gives us the best chance to win. I get it. I get why the fans are frustrated. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's a savior in the locker room at quarterback. If Brandon Sullivan was lighting it up in practice and they weren't playing him, you can't fool the locker room. That would cause a mutiny or a fracture of the locker room. The problem is not having a quarterback that's a difference maker. And I would argue there hasn't been one since Beathard. And that's not taking away anything from Nate Stanley. He had some really nice wins. He didn't win the big games, but Beathard, when he was out there, you're like, this guy's going to do everything he can to win a game with his legs, his arm. And we just haven't seen it since then.
Yeah, he was a true playmaker. He was a guy that you never felt you're out of it, that made, even when they had no receivers in 16. I mean, he engineered victory to beat Michigan, I mean, and stuff like that. And Nate Stanley had great stats. And, I want to say that I got this number somewhere, but, in his 3 years, he threw 68 touchdown passes. And since then, it's like 47, in almost 5 years. It's a grotesque number. And it's one that, now I know that they've gone after quarterbacks and they've looked at them and they've wanted them, and it just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. But Cade is a major disappointment. And, before NIL and before significant money, I would be more hands off on my criticisms. Now I feel like, hey, you're coming here for a reason, that's to play football, and you're getting paid a lot of money to do it. And this money's coming from the fans. This isn't coming from an owner or something like that. So the fans have an expectation, and I understand he was injured last year, ACLs. I mean, that's nothing to mess with, that, but the other day, what I saw in the first half when he was 3-9, it was fundamentally bad. He's aiming passes, missing on passes. His feet weren't set. He doesn't have a Petrus arm. I mean, Petrus was inaccurate at time, a lot of the time, but he has a major arm. He can throw it anywhere and any time. Cade can't. and he was way behind on some receivers and missed some really important throws. And the defense in the first half didn't play well, but they forced field goals, kept forcing field goals. And the offense needed to catch up. The offense needed to help the defense out and be complementary wise. And then the second half, when you've got, I mean, you're Michigan State on the flip side, Rob, and you're like, oh, we've got all kinds of confidence in the world. We're beating this team 15-0 at home or 12-0 at home. We feel pretty good about ourselves. And you gain that confidence. You have a young quarterback who's, and Nick Marsh, who's going to be a NFL guy. I mean, damn. And Michigan State's never lacked for talent either.
No.
Even when they've been bad. So, they got what they deserved. So
such a stark difference when you watch the quarterback play in that game, Scott. You had a young kid who they put in position, a good position, rolling him out, keeping him out of harm's way, running some, design runs for him to keep Iowa's defense honest. And the kid made some freaking throws, man. Right into windows that Iowa gives you, and he hit on them. And you see a quarterback that can make a difference like that, and it even magnifies your frustration as an Iowa fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you start to go back and go, okay, is this an Iowa development problem or is this a recruiting problem? And I'm like, it's both.
Yes, it is. It is both.
Because you just start looking, Rob, at all the quarterbacks they've recruited, and it's like they're taking quarterbacks like you would a lineman. Like, okay, this lineman who's a 3-star from Northwest Iowa, he wants to come to Iowa. Okay, he commits, and then we're done. That's the way they've been like plucking low-hanging fruit at quarterback for so long, because they came to our camp and they want to come here, and we offered them, and they said yes, and that's it. Well, okay, Peyton Manziel, I think he was the last of the Greg Davis guys. He was in 17.
Sounds right.
Texas, ended up at Abilene Christian. He was, you could might make the case he might have been as nearly as good as what they've got now. But 18 was Petrus, who was okay. I think overall, he was the best of the bunch. 19, Padilla, disappointment. 20 was Joey Labus. Didn't get an opportunity. He's not exactly tearing it up now in Central Michigan since his first game. He's like 58% completion percentage, 7-7. So he just fits right into what Iowa's had. Deuce Hogan, well, I think I was wrong on a year. Deuce Hogan was 20 and Labus was 21.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was.
And, Hogan was a backup at New Mexico State. Now is out for the year with a broken collarbone. And then 22 was Carson May, who's back, his second or third team even at Abilene Christian. And it's like, that's a wasteland. And I don't mean
and the guy you took in this class isn't even at the position.
Marco? Or
James Reeser.
Did he flip? Did he move wide receiver?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard, it's been I haven't been able to confirm it because I'm just not as close as I used to be to the program, but it seems like enough people are talking about that. I've seen it on different social media, message boards. I think maybe Pat and the guys from KCJJ even had talked about it the other day on the show. So yeah, it seems like there's fire there with that smoke. But that doesn't surprise me because he was a project and he could really athletic kid, but he was going to need a lot of work on his mechanics as a thrower. And they must have seen that receiver was his best path. And I guess that's not a bad thing right now if you're trying to supplement that position. And I think you can miss now, like in recruiting classes, because you have the portal to supplement. But at some point, Iowa's got to start developing quarterbacks if they want to reach the potential that this program can reach.
Yeah. Because, Marco, was a guy they took really, really, really early. They had a relationship with Tony Rasiopi and, through Nate and through Spencer, and they went there and worked out with them. And then, here, I got this quarterback. And, and Marco is a great athlete and by all accounts, a terrific young man. I've heard a lot of great things about him as a person, but, he's nowhere near second team on right now. And then
we got a snapshot in the bowl game and he can run.
Exactly. Which they should have probably used last year. Yeah. It would have been better than what they had with Deacon.
I think, I don't think we can overlook that either, Scott. I mean, I want to be fair to Iowa fans, and
Hmm.
I don't want to dump on some, Deacon, but that last year, not even trying something else
Yeah.
was just silly. It got to the point in the bowl game where it was to the point where they had no choice but to take Deacon out just for his own well-being.
Hmm.
And we saw it in 2012.
Yeah.
James Vandenberg. No other
Hmm.
quarterback got a rep in a game.
Hmm.
That was insane, and we see there's examples of that through the years at this position
Hmm.
where Kirk is so loyal. And I know he says that it's Tim Lester's decision at quarterback, but come on, guys. We've it's a quarter century here of
Hmm.
sample size. Kirk has put his eggs in the McNamara basket. And again, I don't think Brendan Sullivan's a savior,
Hmm.
but I think if you don't give him more reps moving forward, knowing that he's potentially your starter next year, it's coaching malpractice. And
Hmm.
I mean more than just the red zone. You need to find out in these last 5 games in the bowl game is Brendan Sullivan is your guy next year. Because if he's not, you better get somebody who is your guy.
Exactly. 100,000%. Because in this situation, um, if Brandon Sullivan is not the best quarterback on this team currently, you have to go out and get in somebody else. You just have to, because how can you say, well, we had a lot of faith and trust in him, but we allowed somebody who's throwing 53% or completing whatever passes to be the number one quarterback this year, and he's not even better than that. But next year he's going to be good for us. Come on, don't piss down our backs and tell us it's raining. I think it's um, at this point you got to take that leap. And I don't know what they think out of Cade. If they think, I do wonder, would he be a good teammate if he got benched? I don't know. I'm
See,
not
this
sure.
is where the NIL and the money comes into play again for me.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving him money, he better
Mm-hmm.
be a good teammate. And he
Yeah.
better, I mean, and he has been. I
Yeah.
think we should give him credit. When Sullivan scored the touchdown the other night, he was he was one of the first guys to
Mm-hmm.
congratulate him. Come on, he's into this. Now, that dynamic certainly can change if Sullivan's now getting full series like in the
Yeah.
second quarter. Then we'll see. But I don't think you can worry about that, Scott.
No.
You've done really good by Cade McNamara to this point. And if he can't understand that you're trying to get a look at a guy for next year for the good of the program, then that's on him.
Yeah. And he hasn't, in my eyes, built up enough equity to get that benefit of the doubt, by his play on the field.
Yeah.
Unlike Spencer, for instance. And Kirk made the right choice there. I mean, I was clamoring for it just as much as anybody, that you got to get somebody else in there because he was misfiring on everything. And but they knew that Alex wasn't as good, which also goes back to themselves. You don't even have to.
Evaluation,
Yeah.
development. What are you doing?
Yeah. And well, you put an offensive line coach at offensive coordinator and then make him the quarterback coach, and you want.
Does that give people an indication of how you value the position when you do something like that, or how significant you think the development is at that position? I don't get it.
And then you look at between that and, oh yeah, we're just going to move him over. And and
Yeah.
then your wide receiver coach is what, the lowest paid full assistant, or the lowest paid specific assistant coach on your roster every year. I
Because he
mean,
hasn't coached quarterbacks or wide receivers before.
well, Kelton was that way too. you
Yeah,
know
that's true.
that so
He didn't coach wide receivers in Northern Illinois.
oh no, he did, but I meant pay wise.
Oh yeah,
Kelton
I
was
was
lowest
talking
paid.
experience
Yeah.
wise. Like,
No, they just, like George makes, I think, out of the positions, he makes the most, even more than Kelvin. And then so they've always valued offensive line assistants more. I mean, like when Polasek came in, even though he hadn't coached the position, he was making like 200K more or 150K more than Kelton was. So it just shows you the value of what they're placing at these positions. And
when you think about you hired a quarterback coach that had no experience coaching quarterbacks, so you bring in a guy who has quarterback experience to help him coach quarterbacks. Then you move that guy to wide receiver coach, even though he has no experience coaching wide
Exactly.
receivers. And those are the two positions that get criticized the most on this team.
Exactly. And I will say, I think wide receiver has made a lot of strides.
I'm with you.
I like what I've seen out of wide receiver. They're young. I'll say this, that the trajectory that we knew that they were going to be on, we didn't walk in and expect, wow, this team's going to be great there. But I think they're really making a lot of good strides. And Reese Vanderzee is, after a really big debut and then kind of muddling through some things, I think he's really taken off. Jacob Gill's had a really good year. Seth Anderson brings something new to the table. And then Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard have really added to this team. And, Caleb Brown, of course, quit, but I'm like, he's probably not as good as the other five, so I like the trajectory there. It's really quarterback, and it's making the makeables. That's really what it's all about for this team this year. And that's what Cade should be doing. But when you go 3 of 9 in the first half, I mean, there was no reason they couldn't have gotten 1 or even 2 scores, even field goals out of that first half. And then you're loading then they're Michigan State saying, this quarterback sucks. We're just going to load the box on the best running back in the Big Ten. And he did break away for 1, but there wasn't much they could do.
That was a sweet run, though, man.
Oh,
the Michigan State guys thought they could beat him to the edge, man. And that was just like, nope. That was an NFL run.
Yeah. I mean, the dude's got 1,035 yards right now, and he's averaging 7-8 a carry.
With one of the worst passing offenses in the country.
I know.
And when you look at it that way, and this I wanted to ask you this: what's happening with Luke Lachey?
Yeah.
Is he not getting the routes? Is he being asked to block more? Is he getting like blanket coverage? He's averaging little over 27 yards a game through 7 weeks with no touchdowns. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
I was just going to bring him up, and I'm just like, I can't tell. Honestly, I just can't tell if the routes, if he's getting covered that much better, if they're just saying, hey, we know this guy can still beat us, and we're or what. I mean, he's getting a couple of 1 or 2 good either routes, catches per game, but that's about it. And
there's like no seam routes. It's like everything with him is like across the middle. Like 5-8 yards, and then they throw the ball. Throw the crossing route, and he's, you hope he can break it. It's like you don't give him a chance down the field at all.
Yeah,
but they don't throw the ball down the field. So
because they can't. They don't have a quarterback to do that.
Yeah,
because Tim wants to. That's for sure. He does want to throw the ball down the field. So I don't know about you, Rob, but I think this conversation has talked me into you got to go to the portal.
Yeah,
next year. But kind of gumming up with.
Well, you look at it too. You have a good knowledge of other teams that I know. Minnesota comes to mind. They got the kid from New Hampshire. He's been pretty good.
Yeah.
The Indiana kid obviously is really good, but it seems like Iowa missed in the portal at quarterback, and other schools are hitting. And they're not developing kids either. And that's just, I don't know how you really can maximize your potential as a program if you're still stumbling around at that position.
No question. And like they've dabbled before. They've inquired or had players inquired from them what they might want. And I think that'll still probably happen. I know a few that have reached out to Iowa, and even in the spring, and I know the interest was mutual, but then, of course, they were caught in the whole thing with Cade, and they're like, we can't contact you, but we're interested if you make this decision. That's still probably the case if that happens, and I don't blame them. But I think overall, if nothing else, the team that they just lost to and the team that I just covered in Indiana and Michigan State, both of them, they give you hope, immense hope that Aiden Childs was a transfer from Oregon State. Curtis Rourke was a transfer from Ohio University. They brought Ohio's best receiver with him. They also had James Madison. 12 people, came from James Madison, and a lot of them were all Sun Belt guys from a 12-win team. and they just plugged and
Good
played. And then,
illustration that there's really good players everywhere, at every level.
yeah, I mean, look at the NFL draft. All the times where, oh wow, that guy came from Troy, that guy came from X, whatever, Appalachian State, or Louisiana Lafayette. I mean, it's just they're all over. There's great players, and he went for the veterans in that. I look at Iowa and I think if you got the jack for it, go for it. And it
You just got to hope that they're going to identify and evaluate and get the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
They thought it was Cade, and there's obviously extenuating circumstances with health with him that changed things, but he wasn't playing very well, as you've mentioned on this podcast before, Scott, before he got hurt last year.
Yeah, I know. He's just it's just a guy, and the point was, in his 21 season, which is 3 years ago, by the way, and he's 24 years old
on a really good team.
Yeah, that was he. I mean, we automatically say that he led Michigan to this. No, he was brought along with Michigan to this.
Yeah.
They had amazing talent. I mean, Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. You had the Joe Moore Award winners on the offensive line. They had multiple great tight ends and receivers that are in the NFL making great catches. He was the game manager, and there was a reason why that they were trying to get J.J. McCarthy in. And
there's no J.J. McCarthy waiting behind him in this program.
No, there's no one near that. And so, if you're, what, Jimmy Sullivan is the next guy, right?
He's 25. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm curious to know, I mean, is that just hey, we accepted it and we got him for good, or is that we're going to look around? But either way, they've got to look at the portal, because if Brennan is your best, and if Brennan is your guy, you think for 25, play him right now, period. Say we gotta know what we got, because we're just too inconsistent there today. And there are going to be quarterbacks available. Every school's got them, and I do think Tim Lester is a pretty good coach. I think he's developed some really good schemes. What he's done with Caleb Johnson, we've, haven't really mentioned that tweak, which I can't believe Brian Ferentz didn't figure out, was a godsend to the blocking up front. I mean, Jennings Dunker's blocking like an all Big Ten guy. And I mean, he's blowing people off the line of scrimmage. And Caleb Johnson, when he runs behind him, I mean, it's a freak show for both of them, And so I like a lot. And Logan Jones is playing really well.
Yeah.
And people were talking smack about him for a long time. I like the way the line's blocking. I like the running game, but you just got to get more out of that pass attack. And, it doesn't really matter, unfortunately, because there's no carrot at the end of the stick. Yep.
But I think I think Scott and I both agree on this. You got to play Sullivan more. I don't know. I don't think you need to just out and out bench Cade, but give Sullivan more reps, because you have to know if he's your guy. You cannot wait to the spring to figure that out. You need to know now, so you can get somebody in here in December, get them in for spring ball. If you're doing it that way, I think it's a pretty easy timeline, Scott. Hopefully they take advantage. I kind of got a hint from Kirk. He slipped up a little bit the other day, possibly or not, and we'll find out, when Brendan gets more reps or something to that effect, he said, or with more. He almost said, like, it almost seemed like he was saying that Brendan was going to play more, but I could have misread that too and just be a dumb idiot that's hoping for the most logical approach.
Listening to him about stuff about quarterbacks, like listening to the Fed chairman, you're like, oh, did he say he's going to raise interest prices? Interest rates,
He gives us the best chance to win.
Yeah.
We're playing the guy that gives us the best chance to win. Okay.
It's easy to defer, but every year, we feel like we say this, but it's a different dynamic this year. And that is, you reach a tipping point with your fans. And, again, you got to convince your fans that you're all in, not only this year, but beyond. And when you do have a team like this with all these returnees and
a lot invested, they invested a lot in this team.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And historically, I think we probably look back way too often just because Kirk's been there for 26 years, and we see the seasons that this reminds us of and how things progress. The seasons where it kind of aligns based on a lot of factors: 05, 10, 16. Where you bring back a lot of people, you have high expectations, you're ranked, and then next thing you know, you don't meet them, and that happens at a place like Iowa. And I know the fans don't get it, and I understand, but there is such a thin margin between winning and losing that years like last year balance out. They won all the close games except for the Minnesota one, and it all balances out. Well, this year it goes the other way. The following year has never been really good either. When they kind of have the switch. 06, different dynamic, personality wise than probably any other team they've had, because they weren't a very good team in the locker room.
I enjoyed the Riverwalk that year.
Yeah, I didn't get to go.
I wish the Alamo Bowl would come back.
They will
into the Big Ten rotation. Well, that's good. I like San Antonio.
Yeah, right now it's it's the Big 12's first bowl, and it's Pac-12 Legacies first bowl. You want to talk about confusing bowl projections, because I had to do it. That the teams that are in the Big 10, there are 4 of them. That are in the Big 12, that are 4 of them, and 2 that are in the ACC, and then the 2 leftovers. They all count for the Pac-12 legacy alignment. So if they decide, you know what, we want Kansas State's the best team in the Big 12, who are they going to pick? Well, they can pick Colorado and Dion. Ooh, that's good, but they just already play. They're in the same league now, So it's just it's jacked up.
Yeah, and that impacts obviously the Big Ten as well, right? Because now you've got schools that are in the Big Ten that aren't playing in Big Ten affiliated bowls because they're still playing in Pac-12 legacy bowls. It's going to be confusing.
Yeah, and this is the whole thing that kind of sucks. Is you think about it, like, wouldn't it make more sense if, like, let's say the Guaranteed Rate Bowl in Phoenix is a Big Ten bowl. It's down the low. It's about a 7-win team goes there. If there could be a trade with the Alamo Bowl, because you're going to have good teams that are legacy Big Ten teams, Iowa, Wisconsin, some of the maybe a Penn State even that are going to be in that range. That you got a 9-win Big Ten team playing a 10-win Kansas State, and that's a pretty good matchup for them. Plus, you're going to get people that probably be a little more energized, but instead it's going to end up being like a 6-6 USC, but that's the bowls, and the bowls matter less now than they ever have before.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we'll see how this plays with the Iowa fans moving forward throughout this rest of the season, and what type of involvement and energy they have for where this Hawkeye team could end up. We are well past the time to take a break here. So support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited so much for sponsoring the podcast, and even more importantly, the great work it's been doing in our community for over half a century. We're going to hear from a few more sponsors now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to take a look at the Northwestern Iowa game on Saturday. Hang tight. And we have returned to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels, and yes, some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa City can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hardcore Hawk fans, this is my favorite read. Hardcore Hawk fans got to have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or KNICK 3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or KNICK 3615 at gmail.com. And then, certainly not least, even though it's last, the Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Scott is a fan. There are a lot of other fans here in Iowa City. Really good food. If you're in town this weekend for the homecoming festivities, give it a try. You will not be disappointed. Right, Scott?
I agree, man. Especially now we're approaching Halloween. What a perfect time to go to Black Angel.
Yep, and go up to the cemetery after you're done eating at night.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. There's a little homecoming game this weekend here in Iowa City, Northwestern at Iowa. Let me pull up my dealio here from earlier today. I don't know what I did with that. But we talked about it before. Not a good passing offense at Northwestern. Northwestern has some, Iowa has some significant injuries. Northwestern has, if you talk about the linebacker, Xander Muller, I think his name, Mueller, questionable. And then AJ Henning, probably their best receiver, also questionable. And their kicker is questionable, although the punter is kicking pretty well. Is that David Akers' kid? I think it is.
I don't know, but you might be right.
Landon Akers, I think his name is the punter kicker for Northwestern. And I'll pull up these stats when you talk, but I noticed, because I can't find them now, but Northwestern, not very good in punt and kick coverage. I look at that now because the guy that Iowa has back there, I think, is close to breaking one. And they're worse in kick coverage, I think, than punt coverage, but both are towards the middle to back end nationally, which isn't a good thing either.
Yeah, I'm sure they're hoping for the NFL rules eventually here with the kickoffs and stuff. But this team is tailor made for Iowa on a bounce back from what happened the other day. I mean, all the discussion we had about the defense, let's say, I expect a bounce back because they have equity. They have earned the benefit of the doubt under Phil Parker. They have the players that make that legit. I'm not doubting Jay Higgins or Y.A. Black or any of those people from coming back. And then you look at Northwestern's offense. They averaged 19 points a game. They're last by a lot in total offense in the Big Ten at 286. Now, granted, that's more than what Iowa had last year, but that was a historical low for the Hawkeyes. I mean, 286 is.
Do you know the circumstances of the Maryland game? Because I noticed they scored a lot, but they only had 200 yards of offense.
Yeah, they had like 10 first downs. A lot of turnovers. It was a lot like the Iowa game there 3 years ago in Maryland. Okay. Turnovers, just bad play by Maryland, and then Northwestern had short fields and they took control of it. So in third down offense, they are pathetic. They convert 26.7% of their third down opportunities. Second is Purdue at 33%. I mean, to put it in perspective, Iowa is sixth in the Big Ten in third down offense at 45. I mean, as bad as as much stuff as we've talked about Iowa's offense, they're sixth in the Big Ten in third down, percentage. So Northwestern is not a great team. In a lot of areas, and quarterback being among them. They've thrown 4 touchdowns in 7 games. They are just, they're I think Cam Porter is a pretty good running back. The one thing we do know, David Braun is a good coach. I think Zach Lujan, their offensive coordinator, will be a really good coach at some point. He was at South Dakota State. I don't know that they have the pieces to put it together now. But they're going to fight. And they're going to play you hard. You just got to kind of put them out of their misery early. and you can't allow them to get any kind of hope. And that's always been the issue with Iowa Northwestern since Fitz took over. So it should be a tailor-made game for Iowa. Bad offense, your defense dominates. You get some pretty decent. They give up. They're pretty good run defense wise, but
they're pretty good overall defensively. Not bad. I mean, I think
except against the pass.
Yeah, against the pass, but that shouldn't be a problem this week.
Yeah, they'll be excited about that.
That was mean.
Yeah, I mean, they give up like 62% completion percentage, so you got to figure that. But they're going to load the box, try to beat us that way, and so you've got to make them pay. And so maybe, just maybe, we'll see a long touchdown pass. That's been my goal for a long time, Rob. And I just like to see like a 50-yard touchdown pass with the ball going in the air for like 40 yards and taking off, kind of like what Jalen Knoll did to Iowa. I'd like to see that in reverse.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Iowa's capable of doing that. That's the problem. I did find the statistics I was looking for. The Wildcats ranked 69th. Yeah, on punt coverage, 6.86 yards per punt return, and 92nd covering kicks. They give up over 21 yards a kick return. So this could be a Caden Weeching game.
Yeah. I thought last week would be, Rob. I thought
he was the bright spot.
Yeah, I know. I thought last week, that against Michigan State, in 2020, they had the Charlie Jones bring back. And last year with Cooper DeJean, I thought, okay, Caden Weejan's going to do it too. But maybe it's 1 week delayed. Yeah, I at some point he's going to break one for a touchdown and it's going to count, unlike in the opener, and going to get called back. So, I'll say this, that I was very surprised with the outcome, and even more so with the way the game played out on Saturday. I would probably be more surprised if Iowa doesn't win comfortable fashion, just because of the way it aligns up. It's nothing against Northwestern. It's just styles make fights. But I have kept this because over the years it's been valuable, that this is now under Kirk Ferentz the 8th time they've been a double-digit favorite against Northwestern since 2005, but 2006 is when it started. They only once have they actually covered, and they lost outright the first 5 times that they were a double-digit favorite.
Wow,
they lost outright. Yeah, and then 2006
was the Fat Cats game.
Yeah, and that's what they were. They were 20-point favorites, and they lost 21-7. And then in 2009, when Stanzi got hurt, they were a 15-point favorite. They lost by a touchdown. The next year, over in Evanston, Dan Persa's comeback, they were a 10-point favorite. In 2016 at Kinnick, when everybody started throwing the bottles on the field, they were 12-point favorites and lost by a touchdown. In 2018 at Kinnick, when Northwestern clinched the West, they were 10-point favorites and lost 14-10. When Noah Fant didn't get it in, but let's make sure that, no offense, but Max Cooper and Kyle Gronenweg got in the game, late, but not your first-round tight end.
Specialist.
Specialist. You might want a specialist. And then the one that they've won the last 2, 12 and 21, they were a 12-point favorite, but they won by 5 over there at night. And then in 22, they were an 11.5-point favorite and won by 20. And that was here. That was after the Ohio State game that they got massacred over there. And then they came back, played a really good game. In fact, they only allowed a touchdown on the last play of the game. Otherwise, it would have been 33-7.
Yeah, and I think this is just me kind of predicting based on knowing the MO of the head coach. I think Iowa's going to go with it knows it doesn't have to score a ton of points against Northwestern. It's going to play conservatively early in this game and just try to wear Northwestern down. I think I would be ecstatic if what you said earlier is they come out the first series and take some shots down the field. I think they're going to run into a giant loaded box, and I think it may take a while to break through it, but I think they're just going to keep pounding it in there until they wear Northwestern down. That's my guess, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're aggressive offensively and defensively. And just like you said, bury this team early, take the fight out of them, and just, get a feel good win like you felt like when you beat Washington, that you came
Mm.
out of that game feeling we put three phases together, and now we've got some momentum going into these last four games.
Yeah, turn the roar into a meow. But this might be a litmus test, Rob, for Kirk / Lester in the first quarter, because based on, again, these I'm just going on the statistics without really looking at it. But you've got a team that allows 3.2 yards per carry, means they're pretty good defensively. Yep. They're staunch. But then you look at it, that they allow 62% completion percentage. More than 1,700 yards through the air right now through 7 games. That's close to 240, 250, something like that. When you've got a team that's capable of doing that, you need to attack through that mean. You've got to go through it. And now I don't think Kirk is so hard-headed that he wouldn't. Well, we're just not going to throw, we're going to run. But I think this is where you really want to attack. And so this is the yin and yang game to me. If they run unsuccessfully more than they throw or attempt to throw in the first quarter, then we know our answer. Whether they say it or not, I think we'll know our answer as to who's really more in control of the offense.
Yes, I think we know, but we'll have more evidence as to that situation. And I think for me, Scott, coming out of the Michigan State game, the most disappointing thing, or the most maybe troubling sign, was it looked like last year where the running back had no chance and there were negative plays early in series. It gets you behind the sticks, and it just is a losing formula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they had a good run defense. That was one thing Michigan State did have.
Yeah.
And
it's the same setup this week.
Mm-hmm. Where was the play action pass? They weren't really doing it. And that was really kind of a surprise. I think they were 0-2, throwing. That when everybody's keying on him, that should be, a hallmark of your offense. But, and maybe that's more of an indicative thing of Tim Lester for, call him that, because I don't think Kirk micromanages all of them, but I don't know. I do think that
the throw to the running backs too. That'd be a novel idea.
Yeah. It always floors me since I've moved back here. The best screen team I ever saw were the Chiefs in like 02, 03, when Priest Holmes was there. And I mean, they had Hall of Fame lineman Willie Rofe and Will Shields. Brian Waters is like a 6-time Pro Bowler. He's really good. Casey Wigman was really good. Obviously Tony Gonzalez, and they had a really good couple other players up front, and they could screen. I mean, it's like all of a sudden here come the lineman, and then here comes Priest Holmes, and it's like throw it out there. And he was a weapon unlike any other. And I always thought, with Iowa, with its zone attack and the run, why doesn't it do that more often and get those running backs a little bit in space and get those linemen on the move? I look at Jennings Dunker in particular and think, man, he could be really good on the move. Same thing with Logan Jones, but he's playing center. But
man, Connor Colby's a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Get those guys on the move. Get the running back behind him. It doesn't even have to be him. It could be Jazz Patterson again. But
or Moulton.
Again, or Moulton. I mean, those are going to be your 2 running backs next year. Because the other guy is going to be he's not going to have to worry about NIL next year. He's going to be all right.
He'll have a steady paycheck.
And the sad part is, Rob, real quick on that, is that Caleb Johnson's not getting near the love that he deserves. He's a fucking stud. He is a badass out there, and that needs to be respected. And whether it's from us or from fans or from national, whatever, he is a badass. And, he's every bit in the same ballpark to me as Sean Green in the way he plays. He is tough as hell. And he's and he's going to prove it this year. And, one of these games, he's going to have like a 250-yard game and 4 touchdowns. And it's going to be like, wow. And he's going to have, because we've seen the breakouts and he's got a lot of them, but it's going to be dramatic in a couple of weeks, probably like UCLA or something.
That leads me to some speculation that I've heard, and I think it's people just wondering more than anything.
Yeah.
We're seeing more opt outs
Hmm.
in season with the new setup. I wonder for Caleb if he gets to a point. He doesn't seem like he would do that, but I think you also have to be smart about it. And it's a position that's devalued at the professional level as it is already. So you only have a small window to maximize monetarily your talents. So I wonder about that if we get to like week 10, game 10, 11, 12, and Iowa may have lost a game or two between now and then, if it's a consideration.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past anybody at this point. I mean, you just don't. I'd love to say, well, no, he's not going to do that, but you just don't know. I would caution him against it. I think he doesn't really. He has a track record, but he's going so well that I get it. The opt out is real, and the NFL is important, but your legacy is tied to finishing this season. If you get to game 12 and you beat Nebraska or lose to Nebraska, it doesn't matter. But he's, right now, he's at 1,035 yards. Let's say he gets to 1,900 yards, which is legitimate over the final 5 games. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a first team All American. He's going to be he's going to be a Doak Walker finalist. He might win the Big Ten Silver Football. Mm. So you're going to get your picture up. You're going to have a legacy here, and all you need is another month or a little over a month. And then if you want to walk away for the bowl game because you don't want to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, and you want to start training for the draft, nobody's going to blame you for that. You can go ahead and do that. But I would hope that he would think that in the big picture if he's debating that, yes, the NFL is important and you don't want to risk it. But you also have a chance on NBC on Black Friday to showcase your abilities in front of the nation one last time. And I would hope that he thinks that, hey, I can be an All-American. I can be a Doak Walker finalist. I can, win the Silver Football, which Sean Green was the last one from Iowa to do. Because I look at the teams, Rob, or the players, and quarterback is so bunched up. How do you really, is Dylan Gabriel better than Curtis Rourke or Will Howard or, Billy Edwards has great stats, but Maryland's not very good. I mean, he's almost 200 yards ahead of Kyle Monangai from Rutgers. And he's almost 2.5 yards per carry ahead of him.
Did Harrison win it last year?
Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. So it shows you right there. It doesn't need to be a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, usually it is, but it's usually the Ohio State quarterback. But
I think the Heisman, we're seeing that too this year on a bigger scale.
Right. You might even be able to, if you go out and you have a 300-yard game or something, which I think is possible for him, then you might be in New York. You might be one of the top 5. So, I would hope that he would push through the end of the semester, finish up your classes, do all that. And then, don't worry about the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
You make good points. Those are good points. And I think that's something that he'll have to weigh throughout the second half of this season and do what's best for him. It's different for everybody, right? Everybody has their own individual situations and factors that go into those decisions. So like you said, I've just enjoyed the heck out of watching the kid play. I hope he plays the rest of the season in the bowl game so we get to see him, another 6 times. But I look forward to seeing what he can do in the NFL as well. So he's been a really, really fun story and bright spot this year. And, like you said, I think if I'm like grading, ranking Kirk Ferentz running backs, I think you have a top tier, and that top tier is Betts, Green, and Caleb Johnson. And then after, I think you put like Akram, Albert Young. I think they're below that tier. Also, really, really good, impactful players. But I think if you're going top tier, I think if he, like you said, if he can finish out this season the way he's going now, I think you put him in that top tier with Liddell and Sean.
No question. Yeah, he's awesome. And you know, and one guy that's gotten overlooked is Tyler Goodson.
Yep.
You know, and unfortunately I mean, in 20, he was the perfect running back for that scheme. First team All Big Ten, you know, and that gets overlooked, but that's he was really good. And then in 21, he got 1,000 yards behind an offensive line where he couldn't really do much.
Yeah.
And that was really unfortunate for him and for everybody. But overall, yeah, I mean, Caleb, you know, if you go and your first team All-American, and you know, Ashton Jeanty is probably the Doak Walker winner, but if you're in that category, I mean, you're upper crust, no question.
Shout out Fred Russell too, who was on the
Yeah,
sidelines the other
yeah,
night. Yeah, I saw him
yeah,
congratulate Caleb after the run. That was pretty cool to watch
yeah.
the history, you know, the guy that played 20 years ago
Mm-hmm.
congratulating the guy who's playing now. I thought that was pretty cool from an Iowa perspective. All right, Scott, give me the bad news.
Neither one of us were great last week. Let's just put it that way. We were 3-4, both of us, and
Weren't
different.
we 3-4 the week before, or were we 4-3? It seems like we're hovering around
Yeah,
500.
the week before we were 4-3, both of us. Let's see. We both lost Purdue. I mean, 27.5, which we were like, man, that feels low, but it ended up being 35-0, and it was a ho hum 35-0.
Yeah, that could have easily gone the other way.
Yeah, and really Purdue had some chances to where it could have. I thought they'd like backdoor cover their way in, and they had some, you know, missed a field goal, and then they late in the game they could have scored a touchdown. We both sadly and badly lost Nebraska.
What was the
Yeah,
number on that again?
6.5.
Oof.
Mm.
Yeah. Indiana covered comfortably.
Yeah, they covered like a blanket to there. We both lost Iowa, of course.
Yeah.
I lost. You picked Maryland to be, you know, to take the 7 on USC, and that was pretty close. And then all of a sudden USC crapped the bed, and then I took UCLA, so now they're officially UCLA on our podcast. And you took Rutgers, so UCLA won. So yeah, but
Great University of New Jersey letting me down.
yeah, I know your home university. So speak of your home university, they are traveling. Unfortunately, it's not a subway series for you. It's a cross country series. It's a jet series. But when this
I've
game
moved on to the Knicks. I've moved on to the Knicks. The Mets are out. The Jets suck, and now I'm on to my Knicks, who got pounded by the Celtics the other night. But I still have hopes that that team come together. But back to the picks.
well, you had your Liberty, I suppose. If you
Yeah, Liberty got it done.
Liberty, Liberty, Liberty. Rutgers travels across the country to play USC after the World Series Game 1, Friday night at 11 p.m. Eastern time, and USC minus 14. And I'm going to go Rutgers, but I would pick USC outright.
Yeah, I'll throw the points. I'm not getting beat by Rutgers again. Like you said, the travel and the game time and the short week, I don't like that.
I wrote about it today, kind of the travel stuff, you know, in the Big Ten, and there's been a surge now of these road teams winning some of these games. You know,
UCLA.
UCLA winning at Rutgers, and you know, Oregon winning at Purdue, and Minnesota, that sort of thing. But
Iowa still has its trips left.
Yeah.
One to the left coast, one to the right.
Yeah. Yeah, so they got to go play in the Rose Bowl, which I guess is a good part of the season, right? Hey, you want to go to the Rose Bowl, you got to go to the Rose Bowl. A really interesting game that I've got a little hard read on, and that is Washington at Indiana. Indiana is minus 6.5. I'm gonna still take the Hoosiers just because I wrote enough about them being great that I might as well back it up with my pick.
Yeah, I'm gonna go kind of with the same theory as the Friday night game. Long travel, and Indiana's, I think, the better team, even without its starting quarterback.
Yeah.
And I have confidence that offensive staff will find a way to put Jackson in position to make plays and change up what they need to change up with him.
Yeah, I think he was like 7-8 in the second half.
Is that Trace Jackson Davis's younger brother?
I think so. Yeah, Taven. Yeah. And he started at Tennessee and then transferred.
He's from Indianapolis, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Iowa offered him, and I remember doing a story on that kid.
Yeah. Then there's Donovan McCulley. Remember him as a quarterback prospect that they liked,
Yeah.
and he's transferring out. So it's at midseason. That's kind of weird. I think he just
Hmm.
got passed over. But Nebraska at Ohio State. It's homecoming for the Buckeyes and minus 25.5. They were off
Oh,
last week. So was Nebraska, figuratively. But I'm going to go with the Ohio State University at home.
yeah, I will as well.
Are you going with it?
Yeah, I'll take the Buckeyes.
I'll throw 25
But
and
it
a
wouldn't
half.
surprise me if Nebraska covers that. That's a high number.
Yeah. Well, I could see it being like 38-13 and you lose by
Yeah.
half a point, something like that. But
Yeah.
um, I
I
could
don't anticipate it being a close game, but I could see Ohio State winning by 3 touchdowns and
yeah.
losing the bet.
I could also see it being like 45-0 at halftime, and then
Yeah.
they Maryland at Minnesota tomorrow or Saturday on FS1 2:30 our time. I'm going to take the mighty Gophers
What's the number?
-4.
Yes, I will as well.
They can be up to 5 wins, so
I
good on
cannot
them.
figure Maryland out.
No way. Yeah, that's where we're all in that same boat on that. I mean, to go, to get pummeled the way they did by Northwestern and then to come back and beat USC the way they did, it's just very schizophrenic. It's just hard to really get a grip on it. Really, the best game of the day, if you want to call it that, Illinois at Oregon. Illinois is ranked 20th, Oregon number 1. Oregon minus 21.5 at home. And I'm going to throw the points. I think Illinois had its great game against Michigan. They're excited. The Red Grange game. Oregon didn't play so well at Purdue. I think, they had a tough game before that against Ohio State. I think in this case, Oregon kind of flexes.
Is that Big Noon or Ohio State?
Ohio State. This is on CBS at 2:30 our
2:30.
time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not a night game.
No.
Yeah, I'm just not. I feel like it's still a little smoke and mirrors with Illinois. Not to take anything away from what it's done to this point, they've taken advantage and won games that were there for the taking. I just don't like this setup for them coming off a game against Michigan, traveling
Yep.
halfway across the country against the number 1 team. I'm going to throw the points as well, and
Yeah.
they'll probably win by 21.
Yeah, right. It'll be 42-21. They'll score. I always worry about the backdoor cover, the garbage touchdown at the end. But
Those little hooks get you.
All right, here's one that I think will be. It's. I don't know that might be an entertaining game. It'll certainly be a hotly contested game. And kudos to BTN for landing it. Michigan State at Michigan at night on BTN -3.5. I mean, really, you think about it, that this is Iowa State at Iowa at night. It's crazy, and they hate each other. Probably hate each other more than Iowa State fans do, because I think Iowa State fans kind of intermingle a lot more, in a lot of ways. Michigan State and Michigan fans do to an extent, but there's a lot more vitriol.
Probably the same, being in the same conference probably feeds that a little bit more too.
Yeah. Plus they have a history of some issues, locker room tunnels and stuff like that.
What's the number?
3.5 for Michigan.
It's in East Lansing.
It's in Ann Arbor. Give me Michigan, and I'm almost thinking the Michigan State wins by a field goal. That's why.
I actually think Michigan State might be the better team here.
I do. Yeah.
But being as it's in Ann Arbor and it's such a rivalry game, I will, I'm with you. I'll take Michigan, and it'll be a 3-point game.
Exactly. So I think it'll be like 31-28 or 20-17. They kick a field goal in overtime and win. And then I'm like, ha the hook helped me, but otherwise I would pick Michigan State outright. At Madison at night, which also could be pretty wild. Penn State, undefeated Penn State, 6.5-point favorite at Wisconsin. Give me the Badgers. Yes.
I'll take the Badgers too, and it's with my heart and my head.
Yes.
more of my heart though.
Hey, this team has rolled the last 3 weeks. They've put together some stuff, and nighttime at Camp Randall.
I don't often root for Wisconsin, but I will be this week.
Yeah, this will be. I'd love to be able to say more, but I'm just really.
Is that an NBC game?
Yeah, that's the NBC game. So. Yeah. So, they would love that. I mean, first of all, we know Camp Randall is going to be crazy at night for Penn State, which is what I think 2 or 3 now in the polls. I think they're 3.
Yeah.
But, if they win, they're going to, hopefully they don't crash into the gates and get stuck there like they did that one time 30 years ago. That was pretty scary. But all right, the game that we're covering, and I'm going to be there. I'm excited to be there. Northern Western, as my son used to call them when he was a kid, at Iowa -14. That's the most recent number. Do you know of any other number that's changed?
No, I've kind of seen it stick there. I've seen it dip down to like 13.5 a few places, but 13.5, 14. I think it's right in there, depending on where you shop. So
yeah,
14 is a good number, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to take the Hawkeyes, maybe against my better judgment, but I do think that overall they are the better team, top to bottom. Even at quarterback, they're better, and they're more explosive. AJ Henning being out is a factor, and I think coming off their loss, he leaves them with a sour taste in their mouth. I mean, they had to answer questions they haven't had to answer before, and I think that this is a get well game for the Hawkeyes.
I'm with you. I may get burned by it, but I think this setup, like you said, you laid it out well. Iowa has a history of bouncing back from tough losses and having good performances the next time out, and I think that's probably the case here. And I think it's a perfect landing spot. Nice soft landing spot against Purdue's worse than Northwestern, but I would say they're the 2 worst teams in the conference.
Yeah, I want to see Northwestern play UCLA for maybe the runner-up crown on that. But then the way they dominated Maryland, you're just kind of like, there's like that bottom tier that you just don't know what you're going to get. But I'll say this: Northwestern, I think, has the worst offense in the league, and we know all about what the worst offense in the league looks like, so we can spot it.
And I think I think Iowa's defense is going to be pissed and wanting definitely wanting to they're going to be chomping at the bit to get back on the field to play after they've probably been doing that all week.
Yeah, no question. I'm sure they can't wait to get out there at home and dominate and do all the things they need to do. So, and it'll quiet down a little bit, and then it'll ramp up for, and this is where we get into what's at stake. And all right, there's not the carrot at the end of the stick, but
trophies.
When you're playing Wisconsin, that matters, man. That matters personally. That even though they've changed their dynamic a little bit in their offense, they're still going to be a physical team, and they still want to win. And you've got a trophy, and it's still Badgers versus Hawkeyes.
A lot of history there.
Yeah, you've got to win. That's when it kind of flips. The switch flips. It's like, but let's go out and get this done.
Yep, and then the long trips, and then home for Nebraska, which we thought could be impactful a few weeks ago, and nope.
Not in this scheme.
You said they're still hanging from a thread, but by the time they arrive here in Iowa City, it's going to be all right. Which one of these teams is going to Orlando, and which one's going to Tampa, and which one's going to Charlotte? And that's kind of what they're going to be playing for the next month and a half. Yeah,
that's really going to be it, and it's sad, but at the same time, it's not football, but bowl position is going to matter. I think Iowa is perfectly suited for its happy resting spot of Tampa, Florida, and that's where Kirk would probably go every year if he could. Why? Well, we know where everything is.
Yeah.
But thankfully I don't think I'll have to ever cover beach day again there, so at least not this year, but other people can do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what type of travel, what type of that's another aspect of this, how invested will the fans be to travel to a location like that with the landscape being different than college football.
Yeah, that's a good point. um
And
it also.
I think the core will. I think there's just a really good core base that goes no matter what. But
Mm.
I wonder if there'll be a little drop off.
Right now there's that anger and bitterness and upset and frustration, but once you get kind of past that and you start to go, what, it is football. It's football season. We talk about this all year round. People love it, and you should. It's beautiful outside. It's fall, and you get past it and you start to go, what, I just like being there for these games. Your team's never going to win the national title. It's just not feasible, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. And so if they go 8-4 or 9-3, even, if, let's say they sweep out, I think it's possible. Then what, let's go to Tampa, let's have fun, go watch them
Yeah.
play an SEC team, and celebrate the new year. I mean, it's actually on the 31st this year, so because the playoffs are all on, like, it leads into one of the 4 playoff games. I think it's the Fiesta Bowl. I think Iowa State might play in that.
Is that like Friday night?
Whatever the 31st is.
Yeah, I think it
No,
is.
let's see. That'd be Tuesday night.
Okay.
Yeah, because the first is a Wednesday. So,
Yep, you're right.
so
Yes. Well, we'll see how this plays out, folks, and we'll be back next week to talk about it. We'll talk about recap the Northwestern game, look ahead to the Heartland Trophy game, and all kinds of stuff. I did want to mention real quick here. We're not in basketball mode yet on this podcast. We will be as we move forward here, but exhibition game tomorrow night, October the 25th, Carver Hawkeye Arena. If you're in town for the homecoming game, it's a nice chance to get a look at what the Hawkeyes. I think there's some exciting pieces on this team. I think this team could maybe outperform its preseason expectations if things come together, and they will be playing Minnesota Duluth, who is coached by former Hawkeye Justin Wick, who also attended Iowa City West. So I retweeted yesterday. If you guys go on my timeline, I retweeted a story from up in Duluth. One of the TV stations did a story about his homecoming. So very cool. I covered Justin when he was in high school. He was a really good shortstop in baseball too, but that's a cool angle. So I'm sure he'll have plenty of support tomorrow night from folks he knows and his family in town here. It's kind of cool for the Wick family to be able to get out there and watch that. So if you're in the mood for some hoops tomorrow night, Carver Hawkeye Arena, I'm sure tickets are available.
Yeah, and otherwise there's some high school football. This is what, the last full week of the regular season for the big schools, and first round of playoffs for the.
Yeah, the high school stuff. I know the regional cross country for the big schools was last night, the small schools tonight. Volleyball postseason's rolling right now. Last week of the regular season for the big schools in football in Iowa. Smaller schools are already in the playoffs. I know West Branch and Regina play the playoffs this week already. So we're getting to that point of the season, Scott, where everything's kind of coming together. NBA started this week. WNBA ended this past week. So a lot of things happening in the sports world, but our focus will be on Kinnick Stadium Saturday, 2:30 kickoff. That one's on the Big Ten Network. If you're not at the game and watching it on TV, you can listen to former Hawkeye Anthony Herron, one of the most prepared analysts you'll find around doing that game for the Big Ten Network. So
Absolutely. Yes, very much so.
All right, folks, have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. And I'm not forgetting it this week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.